Hello everyone, welcome to the session on Python for loops. Now loops are really important if you want to do the same thing again and again and again, or if you want to go through a large structure element by element. So we're going to iterate over sequence of elements using the various options we have in Python. So let's start with the for loop. Now let us say we have a set of numbers, a list of numbers like this here, and we want to take the list and sum up all the numbers that exist in that list. So one way to do it would be to take it element by element and then keep adding it. So this is the list of numbers we have defined. Let's have a variable called sum, which is going to store our sum, and we initialize it with 0. So initially there is nothing in this except the value 0. Now we want to iterate over this list. We want to say take 6, add it to sum, then go to 5, add it to sum. So each element has to be taken one by one and added to this variable over here. The way we do it with the for loop is we say for val in numbers. Now this sentence is important to understand. We are using the for keyword. Val is a locally defined variable, so we haven't defined it before. It's going to be used only in the context of our for loop. So val in numbers. In is again a keyword, and this is our iterable here. So in this case the iterable is a list. We're going to go over each value in the list, assign it to val for that iteration of the loop, and then do whatever code block is there indented below it. So in this particular case, our indented code block is you take sum and add whatever you find in this variable over here and add it to the sum. So for the first iteration, what's going to happen, val will pick up the value of 6. It's going to add it to the sum, which is 0 right now, and then once this line of execution is executed, it's over. It's going to go right back to the for loop again and check. For every single number here in the list, it's going to take on a different value, the val variable here, and it's going to add it one by one. So let's see if we can get the sum here now. Let's execute this cell. So once this has reached the end, then it's going to print out this statement, and now our sum is holding the total of all the numbers that are in here. So this is the way a for loop works. We say for, we assign a temporary variable which will be used within the loop code, then we say in an iterable. Let's see another function here called range, and then we're going to integrate this range with for later on. So the range function is a very useful Python function. It lets us define a sequence of numbers. So if we say range and pass it 10, we'll get 10 numbers. Now the way range works is you can pass 3 parameters into it: a start, a stop, and a step parameter. Range is more efficient than other iterables like lists, because range will only define itself on the basis of the start, stop, and step the parameters, and it doesn't need to store everything. So if we have a list of say 5 numbers, all the 5 numbers are stored in memory. If we have a range, only the start, stop, and step are stored. So this becomes really important if the list is, for example, if you say if you have a million numbers, then you don't want to store a million numbers in memory. You would rather store just the start, which is 0 by default, the stop, which is a million, and then the step could be 1 or 2 if you want to skip alternate numbers. So let's see in detail how this works. We're going to take 4 variations of range and print them all out. But before we print them out, let's see what they're going to do. So when we say print range 10, it's just going to print the range object. So it will not print out 10 numbers for us. We'll see how that looks. Then we could convert the range to a list. So we are forcing a type conversion here. When we say print list range 10, so we take the same range 10 that we took in the first line, but now we're going to print it after converting it to list. So we're going to have all the numbers listed out instead of just the start, stop, and the step. Now we can define where the range starts and stops. So by default, if you're not passing anything, it will take it as a stop variable. So 10 is the stop variable. But if you pass 2 numbers, it's going to take them as start and stop. So you start at 2, you stop at 8. Now stopping means the last number that we are including, 8, is not going to be part of the range, right? As in all Python iterations. Here the 10 numbers are going to be 0 to 9. The number 10 itself will not be included. And in the last one here, let's take a look at this one. 2, 20 and 3. Now we are passing 3 numbers in the function. So 2 is the start, that will be included. 20 is the stop, that will not be included. But we are only going to take a step of 3 numbers which fall into that. So after 2 we are going to jump 3 numbers and come to 5 and then to 8. Let's see how the actual look of this execution is. So the first one just returns us the range object. It says the range is 0 to 10. We have not passed 0, but that's the default setting. The second one, we have converted it to a list, so we get the complete list. The third one, it starts at 2, you can see, and it ends at 7. 8 is not a part of the range that we have been using here. And the last one, we are taking a step of 3. So 2, 5, 8, 11, 14 and 17. The next number logically should have been 20, but 20 is marked here. So 20 is not part of the thing. We are not going to count 20 now. Now you can use a range in loops as well. So for loops, instead of iterating through an iterable such as a list, we can also iterate a for loop through a range. Let's take a look at how that works. So I have a list of strings which says pop, rock and jazz. So these are 3 kinds of music that I like. Now I want to print out that I like pop, I like rock and I like jazz, but I want to print them out in separate lines. So one way to do it would be, I want to iterate over this list. Now I could say for I in genre directly, but here I also want to say I can probably use an index function of the list. And now this is an inefficient way of doing things, but this is just to demonstrate how things work. So now my for loop is going to be for I in range, length and genre. So I is, like I've told you before, it's our temporary variable. But what are the values I will take? Now if you evaluate this statement very carefully, you will realize that I is not taking the value pop, rock and jazz. I is now going to take the value which is a range value. But what is that range value? We want to pass the length of our list here. So the length of this list, which is 3 because it has 3 elements, this inner segment is going to unpack to 3. So we're basically saying for I in range 3. And when we say range 3, it becomes 0, 1 and 2 because 3 is not included and it starts at 0, which fits in perfectly with the concept of list indexing because the list indexing also starts at 0. So now I is going to take on a value which is range 3, which is going to be I in 0, 1 and 2. Right, let me just comment it here. And so these are the 3 values that I is going to take. Now let's look at the statement within the for loop. We want to print I like. This will obviously get printed every run of the loop. But now we have genre, which is our list, and we are referencing the index value. So index value genre 0, genre 1 and genre 2 will be printed. So now we are using the index values to run through a for loop. Let's see what the outcome is. So it is as expected. So this is another way that a for loop can be used combined with a range function. So now let's look at for loop with an else statement as well in it. If you have gone through the section on conditionals, you know that else is traditionally used with an if statement. So if a condition is true, then you do something, else you do something else, right? Let us look at how else can be combined with a for loop. What happens is that a for loop runs to completion, and once it is done with the entire iterations, then it goes to the else statement. So this is our code here. We have taken 3 digits, these as a list, so 0, 1 and 5. Now we say for I in digits. So now you know what's happening. I is going to take the value of each of these elements, 0, 1 and 5. For I in digits, we're going to print that value that we have taken. So it's going to print 0, then print 1, then 5. And once this segment is over, the for loop has run through all the numbers here, then it moves on to the else statement, and then it says print no items left. So it's a sort of indication that, okay, you have run through the list, you have done the job. So this is what it looks like. First it will print as part of the for statement, then it goes to the else. Now take a look at the for function in the setting of a dictionary. So the situation is we have a student whose marks we want to find out, and we have a dictionary containing the names of all the students we have and their marks. So one way to do it would be to just look at the dictionary and see the name and the marks and tell our student what marks that student has. Now in this case you can just have a quick look and see that the name Soyuz, which is an unusual name I should say, does not occur in these three. So the dictionary is not really containing this entry. But if it's a larger dictionary, 1,000, 2,000 entries, then you would not want to just eyeball it, you'd want to have a proper function going for it. So the function we are defining, the loop we are going to run is a for loop. The student's name that we are looking for is stored in a variable called student name. The marks is a dictionary that we have defined here. So let's see, for student in marks. Now student is a temporary variable, we have not defined it before. So it's going to run through the dictionary marks and it's going to pick out the values from the dictionary one by one. It's going to pick out the keys one by one. So if student, which is the key that we have picked up, is the same as the student name that we are looking for, that is, if we have got a match, then we print the entry in the dictionary which corresponds to the student that we have picked out. So we print marks of the student, right? And if we do not find this, then we go back and start again. But if we do happen to find it, we can just break at this point of time. Okay, so this is how it works. Let's run it and see. Now we know that we did not have any student with this name in this dictionary, so obviously we ran through the entire loop, did not find it, so we were then forced to move on to the else statement, and we printed that no entry with the name was found. Let's see if we can change the name and something else can come up. Let's say the student's name was Jules. We run it again, and now this time it's found Jules and given us the marks, which is 55. So that's all for the for loops. I hope you enjoyed the session. See you in the next one.